Hi, welcome to another edition of Making Sense. And as you are probably aware, we've been away for a number of weeks, and you're also aware that our colleague, Artie, has left the company and the show. So today we've got the latest addition to the team, and let me introduce Tanabulad, also known as Boat. He is a very experienced journalist and covering anti-government rallies. So he's no stranger to the political scene. And today we're going to be touching on an issue which is close to heart, and that is the anti-government rallies which have taken place for several months. But the problem that we have, what we've noticed in the past few weeks is there has been no protest anywhere in Bangkok or outside of Bangkok. It had been built up. The protests have been built up for weeks prior to that, and it had been held almost every other day, or every day on the weekends. But certainly the protest movement stopped, and it raises the question why that is. So would you like to
So of course they are not taking a break because this is Christmas, but just to give an overview, they are calling for three demands, and that is the ouster of Prime Minister General Charter rewrite and monarchy reform. However, so far, none of their demands has been achieved. So I think they have to take a break in order to readjust their strategy.
Right. I think I agree with you, because it appears to a lot of people, especially the people who have been following the news, and that is they seem to they were under the impression that the protests were so dynamic at one point, and they'd been carrying on being very dynamic, and then suddenly it stopped, and it didn't. I think the protest organizers didn't exactly give them the people the reasons, explain why. They only said that they're going to come back after the new year, and they're going to be coming back stronger, right, with more people, even more people, and they're expected to intensify their demands even further. So I think a very interesting point that you made, that none of the three landmark, if I may say, landmark demands have been met, and I think they have given quite weight on the third one, which is monarchy reform, right? And how do you think these demands, or the demand particularly about the monarchy reform, has changed the movement in any way?
Just to go back to the day when Panasya Siti Jiravatanagun proposed the 10-item manifesto on monarchy reform at Thammasat University. She outlined very detailed points on monarchy reform, and however, so far the monarchy has not responded to this demand, has not clarified any points. On the contrary, the monarchy has been more approachable to the public, and that is what it is under the impression. And that they are throwing stone at the wall.
Well, I think there's a very interesting point that you made, because the monarchy has been, it's like you're throwing a stone into a wall, and then and there has been a few points made about the other two our demands, haven't really been touched upon. And I think that's the point of interest here, because the observations have been made that if you give weight too much on one demand, you tend to lose sight of the others. And in this particular case, you are focusing a lot on quite a lot. You give a lot of energy, you give a lot of limelight. You put a lot of limelight on the monarchy reform, and that in a way has drummed up the support from the other side. The yellow shirts rather. The yellow shirts have come out on the streets in support of the monarchy, but they were actually supporting the Prime Minister to stay in power as well, because he is a very strong line of defense for the institution. So not only have you not achieved the third demand, which is the reform of the monarchy, you have actually strengthened the Prime Minister, which is really contrary to what you want, right? So this is the situation. This is where we were heading, and looking beyond the new year. How do you think they're going to come? Are they going to come back? The protesters? They've said they are.
Yes. So last week, human rights lawyer Anon Nampa said that they are going to come back fiercer, but in light of the re-emergence of the COVID-19 outbreak, he somehow changed his tactics. He said that he will assess the situation and then run the campaign again, but it is not necessary that it will be protest, because there are other options.
Oh, other options.
But he hasn't yet spelled out details. I think if you look at the broader view, right now, the pro-democracy movement is sort of a coalition of several groups, but the Free People groups and the United Front of Thammasat and Demonstration are core groups, right? And right now, people are talking about what can be perceived as internal rift in the pro-democracy movement after the Free People group proposed the restart campaign with a controversial logo featuring a hammer and a sickle on a red background, which has been associated with communism.
Right. I think that kind of symbolism that they have raised has also raised a lot of eyebrows, and a lot of people find that quite bewildering, to say the least. So do you think that is going to take their rally movement to another level, as they have anticipated? A lot of people have anticipated. How do you define intensifying demand?
Just to give a background, communism in Thailand has been like a taboo subject, because during the Cold War era, the Communist Party of Thailand waged war in rural areas in order to establish the communist regime in Thailand alongside our neighboring countries. So therefore, the proposal for communism instead of democracy has revived the goals of communism. But I think the proposal for communism, the overtone, the socialist overtone, has been an effort in order to appeal to the working class, because right now the majority of demonstrators are students and the urban middle class in Bangkok. So therefore, in order to expand the movement, they have to gain more support from other group of people. And I think it is the working class, the blue collar in Bangkok. And so I think this is the strategy it is possible that this is the strategy of the Free People groups. And in addition, the United Front of Thammasat and demonstration focus solely on 10-item manifesto on monarchy reform. So some way, somehow, they, and there are other factions as well, like other groups on the LGBT. There are several groups, the disabled or student. They have their own ideas and their own proposals. But at the center of the entire movement is their core three demands, as we mentioned earlier. So you can see that this is their strategy to expand the movement in order to gain wider support from different group of people. They can merge again into the Khana Rasadon and split whenever they want. So I think this is their tactics in order to gain wider support from the people.
So do you think they're going to carry on this, segmented movement, well into the new year, right? But they've also said, and this is what one of their mantras, and that is to have leaderless movement, protest movement. So is that something that we actually can identify with? I mean, is that really practical, not having a leader? Because it seems to me like if you have all these different groups, you mentioned we've got very diverse groups of protesters, and then do they really listen and act in line with what anyone or any group of core members ask them to? Is that something that has happened? Because in order to we would think logically, when you want to call people to a gathering, you would need somebody to be the center person, to be the coordinator of all of this, and this group of people, coordinators, whatever you want to call them, they're leaders, right? So they really cannot deny the fact that they have leaders, right?
I think it's just the rhetoric. I mean, they have to communicate with the public that they have no leaders. The entire movement is rudderless in order to ensure that the movement can move forward more easily. Because in the past, when they often announce the venue and then change in order to prank police officers, to streamline the movement, to make it more easier to adapt to police crackdown. So I think it's just the fact that they claim that this is the leaderless movement is just a strategy, but in fact they are leaders.
What do you take on the pandemic? Do you think it's going to possibly have any kind of impact on the movement after the new year, the protest movement?
As Anu Nampa said, he will assess the situation and then consider what kind of campaigns the protests will take on again. But I think the new outbreak of the coronavirus will allow the authorities to step up their crackdown on protesters, because there are reasons. Because the protests can lead to the spread of the virus. So therefore it can be the justification for the authorities to crack down on them.
Right. So it seems
it can reduce the number of protesters.
Well, it seems like the pandemic has been, this is not, I don't know if I can say this, but quite a blessing in disguise for this government, because earlier in May and in April, early in April, when the pandemic struck, and everybody thought the government was bombarded with all these problems, especially the economic problems, which is really weighing down on the government, and the government was in really bad shape, economic, as far as its economic handling was concerned. But then the pandemic, the way the government managed to jump into the water and try to, rally all the, medical staff and the, professors, in medical faculties, coming together and, working out really, a combating strategy. So that, in a way, saved the day and also saved the government. And now, second time around, it is also quite, fascinating because we've been, anticipating a lot of, political, unrest following the new year. Do you think it's going to, it's going to be placid, after the new year as far as, the protest movement is concerned? If Anand Nampa has mentioned that there could be other kinds of, protest. It doesn't have to be, played out on the streets. I mean, possibly in the cyber world, on the online, do you think there's going to be more forceful and certainly fierceful campaigns taken online?
Yes, I think it's possible. I mean, they can launch virtual campaigns. Because if you go to Twitter, it is the home of digital native, where protesters discuss several issues.
From what I've observed, there's already a kind of intense campaign building up because they haven't been on the streets for quite a while.
Over several months, I would like to draw attention to the fact that youths on Twitter often discuss alternative history on Twitter, and it challenged the main ideology or the main pillar of Thai royalist nationalism. And some way, somehow, this can sustain the movement.
Do you think if the anti-government movement is going to take their campaigns online, do you think it's going to lessen that potential confrontation or possible violence?
Yes, it can, because people are no longer going to street if that is the case. And I would like to draw attention to the fact that campaigns online, especially on alternative history, can allow the youth to expand and strengthen the movement in a way, because it can attract other public users to join force with them or to debate.
Right.
It allows people to discuss whether or not what they have been taught in school or what they have been told by their seniors, whether or not it's correct version of the history.
Right. So I think that it raises a very interesting question also about the reconciliation panel, right, initiated by the Parliament President John Lee Pai, right. It seems to be going into a sunset because it doesn't seem to be taking off. It doesn't seem to materialize, right, and because the protest core members have said that they're not going to join, right? And even within the parliament, the opposition has voiced a disagreement with the making up of the panel, right? So it seems like the purpose that this commission or committee has been designed to serve, it's not going to be, carry any impetus. It's not going to carry any thrust. It's going to be any kind of, it's going to fall, out of favor with a lot of people. But even though, it could be a way out of the situation, it could, bring a permanent end to this problem. Could that be a solution?
I disagree. I think what we are facing now is the lack of consensus. I mean, none of their demands has been achieved, and what the government is doing can be perceived as an attempt to keep them in power.
About them. I mean, if you're talking about the consensus,
yes, because
what kind of consensus is that?
It is the point where everybody can agree It's like just the threshold where that is acceptable to every side. Because right now, while none of that demand has been achieved and they refuse to compromise, and on the other hand, what the government is doing can be perceived as just a route to buy time. I think this is a journey like the leader of the now defunct Future Forward Party, Thanakorn, said. This is
ธนาธรจึงรุ่งเรืองกิจ
yes, Thanakorn
yes.
said this is a long journey, and I think what youths these days they are successful in raising political awareness and drawing attention to all structural problems under the rug and challenging the status quo. In my opinion, what they need is patience. They have to wait for maybe for 5 or 10 years until a generational shift takes place to change the system from within. Because right now the political system is dominated by pro-establishment sides.
Right, so on that note, I think we're going to end this week's edition, and I hope you enjoyed today's show as much as we did. If you like us, if you like this episode, like us, hit that like button, subscribe, and please join us in our next edition. But before we go, we've talked about a lot about politics. So let's turn to economics. Okay, we've got the oil situation has pretty much on a very fluctuating side. In this we've got a very useful message on the oil market situation. Okay, so it's going to be very useful, for us, people for all over the country. So thank you very much again for joining us for today's edition. So until next time, so let's make sense.
The outbreak of COVID-19 has severely contracted the world economy, and the demand for oil was affected accordingly. The International Monetary Fund, or IMF, has cut its forecast for global economic growth, or GDP, in 2020 to a contraction of 4.4%. Meanwhile, global oil demand will not return to the 2019 level, estimated at 100 million barrels per day by the International Energy Agency, or IEA. In 2020, global oil demand has dropped by 9 million barrels per day to around 91 million barrels per day. Regarding oil production of major oil producers and exporters, OPEC Plus maintains a policy to closely observe oil prices to prevent another fall in price if COVID-19 spreads again. At the same time, the price has to be closely monitored not to recover too strongly, as it would affect the fragile global economic recovery. Once President-elect Joe Biden is president, the United States is likely to reconsider the nuclear deal with Iran and ease the sanction measures. It will likely allow Iran and possibly Venezuela as well to resume oil exports, thus increasing oil supply on world markets. Moreover, Joe Biden's long-term energy policy is likely to see the U.S. recommit to the COP21 agreement that supports global warming reduction. Moreover, the U.S. will emphasize clean energy and limit crude oil and natural gas production, which may slow U.S. crude oil output. In summary, oil prices in 2021 are likely to rise and become less volatile than in 2020. It is expected that the world will be able to control the spread of COVID-19 by the third quarter of 2021, and the demand for oil will begin to increase significantly in the second half of next year.